if you're a young Zoomer listening to this and you don't have a job, you need to get your ass down to the local Costco and you need to become a Costco greeter. You need to be Costco maxing.
Yeah. Forget
software engineering. Software engineering
Yeah.
is fake and gay. You should be a Costco greeter. You can meet women that way.
When you get off of work, okay, you got the Costco food court right there.
Yeah, you can eat at the Costco.
So you're making $32 an hour, and then you can have 2 hot dogs for lunch, pay $3.27.
Boom, that's only like a tenth of an hour.
Yeah. So you're just, and then you get a pizza.
Now you shouldn't be eating hot dogs and pizzas because RFK will put you in a camp.
They have a salad at Costco.
You get the salad, and you drink water.
Yep.
Maybe a LaCroix. LaCroix's on Fridays.
Yeah, that's a treat.
Yeah,
that's a treat.
Your Friday treat, LaCroix. Welcome to the Hidey Hole podcast with your host, Bingo Bobbins. That's me. I am Bingo Bobbins, and I am the host. We had a really exciting first episode of the podcast lined up. I actually had, as a guest, all scheduled and ready to go, Ben Shapiro, if you can believe it. I was going to have Ben Shapiro on the podcast, but unfortunately he did have to cancel at the last minute, citing scheduling conflicts. And I got to be perfectly honest, I don't know that I believe him. I don't want to cast dispersions unnecessarily, but he was talking a lot of shit on the socials because he and I, like, basically when it comes to prominent voices on the internet, it's like me and Ben Shapiro, everyone knows that. And he was saying, debate me, bro. Like, you won't debate me. And I was like, of course I'll debate you. I'm not afraid, dude. Like, come on the pod. And he was like, you don't even have a podcast. What are you talking about? And I was like, well, that's a fair counter argument, but I could make a podcast. So that's what I'm doing. And it was really kind of, I did all this work for Ben and then he bailed on the last second. Fortunately, I did have a backup guest, which is the Count, a friend of mine. And you may be asking yourself, the Count of what? And that's actually his Substack handle. He is countofwhat.substack.com. I forgot to have him plug the Substack when we were recording the podcast, so I am now plugging him before I play the podcast. And I'll put it in the show notes, but you should definitely check him out. He's a funny guy, a smart guy. He's relatively new to Substack. It's the countofwhat.substack.com, and here we go. Hey, Count, how are you?
Oh, I've been good. It's been an exciting 2025 so far.
Yeah, it's been a month and a half. It's been a full month of the new regime. Yeah. The camps are being set up as we speak, I believe.
Yeah, Guantanamo Bay is going to be full again. That's really what we voted for.
Really, yeah. Well, and also I think the key part about Greenland that people don't think about is that if you're going to set up camps for political dissidents, which I think is obviously what's coming, everybody knows this, then it needs to be somewhere cold, right? And like, we don't really have a North American Siberia the way that they did in Soviet Union, for example. Well, so really, we need Greenland because we need to ship our political enemies to camp.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. The Russians really figured that out in the 50s. You can't have a forced labor camp if it's not cold outside. because then
Yeah,
it's
because
just
they'll
summer
just
camp.
run away.
It is just a summer camp without that. You'll have them running away left and right. It's a problem.
Yeah.
So Greenland, perfect spot for forced labor camps for prisoners.
Yeah, and I think that we're well on our way to that. So things are going well, I would say. But what we were going to talk about today is tech specifically, and things are maybe not going as well in tech.
Yeah, it's been quite the crazy market. I mean, a lot would say the last year or two. I mean, we can even go back all the way through the beginning of coronavirus.
Well, let's do that actually, because to me, so spoiler alert, like both you and I are in the Tortuga Society.
Yeah.
Which, for people who don't know what that is, it was started by Walt Bismarck, sort of a way to get our guys paid lucrative sums, generally by job stacking.
Yeah.
And which, again, if you're not aware of what that means, that just means exactly what it sounds like: stacking 2 jobs or 3 jobs if you can swing it, multiple jobs if you're working remote. There's no reason why you can't have multiple laptops open at the same time making that money.
Well, considering most office workers only work 20 hours a week, it's
at the most, right?
Yeah, it's barely a 40-hour work week for most people. So
yeah, so you're leaving money on the table. And you and I kind of came up, or independently sort of figured this out early in the coronavirus times when everything went remote.
Oh, I mean, it was great. It was a great open market for it. Everybody was forced to be at home. I don't know about your particular background, but I was working remote well before the pandemic started.
Were you working remote before the pandemic?
Yes, most of my career actually. The job right when the pandemic started, I wasn't, but in all of my previous positions, I'd been remote to some extent.
Nice.
So for me, it was normal.
Yeah, we had a pretty flexible work environment where I was working. Like, so it wasn't explicitly like a remote thing, but it was like come into the office if you feel like it, right? So I basically went into the office when I wanted to use the whiteboard, like if I felt like there was a meeting that needed to get everyone in the same room, but it was like, or if they were doing a happy hour after work that day, I would go.
Yeah, which those are all but gone too. But
yeah,
but we digress a little bit. I mean, when the pandemic first started, people who had never worked remotely before were first getting into it, and honestly just slacking off. Like, it was pretty insane how many people did almost zero work.
Do you think most people who were working remote during the pandemic were doing no work? Because I did work. I remember doing work during the pandemic.
You could say that for engineers, but I would say that your average office worker, at least the ones that I worked with or dealt with, were doing the absolute bare minimum to get by. I mean, I had a roommate at the time who would literally finish all of his work on overtime in the last hour or two of the day between 5 and 7 p.m. And the rest of the day he played mobile games. Sitting in his pajamas every day. He was
Imagine having all day to do whatever you wanted and spending it playing mobile games.
Oh yeah, I mean, most people are very uncreative when it comes to their home life.
There's so much better things you could be doing.
Well, don't forget that the television reigned supreme from, the 60s through the mid 2000s, late 2000s. Everybody had a TV in their living room. They just watch it all day long.
Watch TV all day, yeah. That's true. I mean, and he was, what did he do? He was like a data...
He was an accountant, basically. Just an Excel monkey.
Okay. Yeah. Because I don't even really know what people do for office, like people who have office jobs. Like, I don't really know what they do if it's not engineering. Like, I'm sure that it's something, but but I literally don't know what people do.
It's just Excel or reports,
yeah,
or documentation.
Well, I remember I knew some some people who were doing marketing, and their job was to like write blog posts
Yeah.
that were tangentially related to the business, and then they would be hoped that people who were looking up this information would find the blog post, and then that would somehow start them on the funnel to purchasing the product or something. It seemed like very superfluous. Like this job doesn't need to exist.
Well, I mean, it doesn't anymore. That's what ChatGPT is for.
Yeah, they were literally doing ChatGPT work. Like just that can be replaced. They can all be replaced. Uh, but yeah, so that but the point that I think that we were sort of getting to with regards to the COVID like remote boom was that was the heyday of, because it was also there was also a tech bubble because they were printing all this money
So
and like distributing it, and so people were trying to like find a place to park this cheap money, and they were inflating the stock prices of all these tech companies, so these tech companies were also hiring.
well,
So it's like,
there's more to it than that, right? So the tech bubble, technically, there was the like late '90s, early 2000s tech bubble, right? Where
right.
you know, a bunch of VC saw the internet, they threw money into it. A bunch of companies got
You're talking about the .com bubble.
yes, the .com bubble from the late '90s, early 2000s.
.com.
I mean, they were trying to sell cars online back when you needed dealership licenses. They were selling furniture online. It took 30 years to make that work with Wayfair. But .com bubble happens.
It turns out all you have to do is put kids in the closets, and
Yeah.
that's how you make that work.
Yeah, you make all your profit margins on 12-year-old kids that are sold as $30,000 furniture.
Yeah.
So, I mean, then we get into Bush. Bush kicks off the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He's got a problem, though. He needs more money to fund this, right? He's sending billions of dollars overseas. And so
I'll get into some Bush, let me tell you.
Alan Greenspan and him basically start to turn on the money printer. They're lowering interest rates. They're inflating the national debt. All of this leads to the '08 housing crisis. Money got too cheap. Interest rates got too low. The solution was to print your way out of it. Obama continued it. Bernanke continued it. And so really we've been in kind of a low interest rate inflationary phenomenon since 2012, 2013, which has led to part of the tech boom. But yeah, you're right. In 2020 is when it really kicked off with the government injecting just metric ass tons of cash into the economy, as well as basically putting the interest rates at zero.
Yeah, well, they had slowly started, because they kept interest rates at zero since the housing crisis of 2008, basically, right? And they had just started to like raise them a little bit during Trump's first term.
Trump got them. They were actually higher after the '08 housing crisis than they were in Trump's term. Yeah, Obama lowered them all the way through.
Yeah, no, Obama. Well, Ben Bernanke. Like, let's be honest, the Federal Reserve Chairman does the interest rates, and he's not really beholden to the president, right? But they kept the interest rates at zero for the 8 years that Obama was in, and then they gaslit everybody that we had a great recovery, and on paper it looked good, but it was all like just printed money. Right?
Well, yeah, especially when you have the likes of Facebook and Google and these just giants dominating the S&P 500 at that time.
Yeah, and during the COVID bubble.
Yeah, well. And I mean they got another burst or another boost during the COVID bubble.
Yeah, but they had all this money. They were getting, and they were doing the Inflation Reduction Act, in which they printed money, and they were distributing all this this money to the various tech companies, and there was sort of, everyone was working from home, everyone was using Zoom, everyone was very bullish on tech, so that funneled a lot of money into the tech sector. And so all these companies were hiring, and you were working remote. So it was like the easiest time to find a job as a tech worker, and you didn't have to go into the office. So it was like the golden age of job stacking.
It also burst the bubble of the San Francisco elite when
Right, because you don't have to live in the Bay Area to work at one of these tech companies anymore if everything's remote.
and all these Bay Area companies were happy to pay $250,000 a year for a software engineer. Now they're playing in the remote space. They can cut their rates $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and find somebody just as qualified.
Yeah, for sure. Like the going rate around our area for someone, who's halfway decent is probably about 150.
Yeah. Which is
much lower than what you would pay in the Bay Area, but it's also much higher than it was 4 years ago.
True. And
but we don't expect that to continue, right?
It depends. Right? So if you look at the venture capital side, they basically shut their doors. All of the VC firms basically cut spending in 2023, 2024.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies they funded at the beginning of the pandemic, they let die. For better or for worse. The problem that they're having now is they're sitting on, at this point, it's about $500 billion in
of money that they have that they're they don't want to invest. They want to wait and see.
Yeah, it's called their dry powder. So it's basically just money in their pockets that they have to do something with. So what'll happen with VC is a pension fund, XYZ, will take a bunch of money and they'll give it to the VC, and then the VC will get money when they invest that. So right now it's sitting in dry powder. The pension fund's the one profiting off of it. They're making 3 to 4% interest or whatever the 6 to 9 month treasury yield is right now. I think it's like 4.5.
I think it's about 4.5.
Yeah, so
I haven't looked in a while.
So the pension funds who actually back the VCs are making about 4.5 on their money that is sitting in the VC coffers, right? And then the VCs are being cautious on spending that money because they need to hit a certain percent or they'll basically get cut off by the pension fund. So we're seeing record amounts of dry powder. It's between $250 and $500 billion.
And this is money that VCs want to spend, but they can't find a place to put
it.
They
want to spend it to get their management fees. So yes, they're just looking and waiting for a good opportunity to throw money into.
Well, I mean, that sounds kind of bullish for tech, if I'm understanding it correctly, because doesn't that mean that they're gonna spend it on something?
Well,
they're gonna give somebody some money.
See, the other problem they have though is they have to beat the trade-off, right? So let's say a tech company makes 2% or a VC makes 2% when they invest your money. Okay. And interest rates are 4.5%. So now for the pension fund to make money, the VC has to make a 6.5% return. Whereas during the Obama times, right, during the zero interest or even beginning of COVID, when you had a zero interest rate phenomenon and you were getting 0.7, 0.5% on your treasuries, the VC only had to make 3% a year to profit.
To be more profitable than just buying treasuries.
Exactly. So you have to beat the treasuries and the VC fee. So really the VCs while they have all this money to invest, they have to do twice as good as they did.
So they have to be picky.
Yeah, they have to be very picky.
Basically, they're going to park all that money in treasuries.
Oh, it's already parked in treasuries. It's already parked in treasuries. Now, the other factor of this too is this is going to lead to smaller rounds of funding, right? Why is the pension plan going to approve you parking $100 million in a startup when the startup's going to park that $100 million in treasuries and then basically live on the interest?
Right, which is this is what I was saying that I wanted to do was I wanted to put together a business plan, go to some VCs and be like, hey, I have this great idea for this product, give me $10 million. And then they would give me $10 million. And then I would put that $10 million into QYLD, which pays 11% interest, and that would net me $1 million a year in dividends. And then I would hire, I would do stuff with that $1 million, but I would never have a burn down chart where I was going to run out of money, and I wouldn't have to worry about becoming profitable. Really, I mean, I would. The the, the people who gave me money would probably want to see profit at some point, but you know, I feel like that's a great business strategy.
Well, I mean, for $1 million bucks,
I would put that
for $1 million
yeah,
bucks, you could put 5 engineers in a room.
Yeah, and be like, come up with something.
Yeah, and just basically have an indefinite company.
Yeah,
with a group of well-funded individuals.
We could call it Infinite Co.
Yeah,
and it would, and our logo would be like a little infinity symbol or an Ouroboros.
If you're listening to this podcast, we expect 99% of your company if you start this. So this idea isn't free.
I'm patenting this as we speak. I'm on my other laptop. I'm patenting this, so we will sue you if you steal my idea for Infinity Co., which is a company that that doesn't yet exist but will.
But
I think that's a great business strategy.
No, I mean, it's not just the VCs, though. It's the VCs and the pension plans. So in realities, while something like that is novel, while one of the VCs would do it, I don't think it'll become the norm in the market. I think the norm in the market is going to move to much smaller rounds of funding.
Yeah.
So instead of a $25 million Series A, I think you're going to start seeing $5 and $10 million Series A's. And then,
I mean, I'll take it.
You're going to see a lot of interim rounds just to keep these companies afloat, and you're going to have a lot more investment from the VCs because they need to justify this money going out.
But there's also, so basically, what if I'm understanding you correctly, basically startup land is going to be a lot tighter. It's not going to be free money for every dumbass idea, and that's not necessarily terrible. But if you're used to working in an environment where you can just get a job in a startup fairly quickly, when you change your LinkedIn status to open for work, and the recruiter spam just starts pouring in. That hasn't been quite as true the last like 8 to 10 months, I would say. And you think part of that is the startups, but what about the big companies? Like, they don't have to worry about VC funding, like an IBM or a Cisco or a Amazon.
Well, I mean, they're also kind of learning that they overhired.
Right.
For some reason, they all jumped on the bandwagon of we need bigger budgets, we need more people during the coronavirus pandemic, when they should have been doing quite the opposite. I personally expected most of the big tech to kind of contract during that time, but they just went balls to the wall.
Yeah.
So
that's what I think they were getting, but some of this money from the printing presses, right? Like,
oh, most certainly they were getting extra money from government contracts. They were doing PPP loans. They were playing games any way they could. They were COVID tracing apps were literally just printing. Everybody had one. There are millions of them, and anything you could do to crack COVID, you'd get $500,000 on your doorstep the next afternoon. But they're still in a layoff cycle, right? They're slow reacting dinosaurs. They tried to react quick to the pandemic, and they did, and then they overhired, and then they said we need to lay off, and they're just going to keep laying off. I think you're going to see another 10 to 15% reduction at the big tech names. IBM, Cisco, Facebook, Google, etc., from where we are now.
Yeah, so that's not painting a super rosy picture if you're a young rosy-cheeked 22-year-old college graduate with your computer science degree and you're going out there into the job market today. It's not 2021, basically.
Oh, yeah, you will not find a job as a junior engineer in 2025. Like, they don't exist. They're unicorns.
I wouldn't say that there's none, but it's certainly going to be you're going to be job hunting, which is a very novel position to be in as a software engineer over the past decade, like where you're trying to find a job and it's difficult.
Well, something to remember too is with the change in tech stacks, the kind of concept of a junior engineer is slowly evaporating.
You think it's going to be a complete like ladder pull where senior engineers are just using like LLMs to like write code, and then they quickly code review it and then push it up, but like juniors won't have any foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, what do you need a junior engineer to write code for? I mean,
But I feel like that's kind of always been a little bit true, though. Like, no offense
I mean,
to junior engineers, but
at least 4 or
like,
5 years ago, you still had problems where you're like, okay, we have all this data in X format, get it into Y format, right? Just
yeah,
simple data moving, building the login page, building forgot password, just your standard build the settings page. We just give it to the junior engineer because we don't need it for 6 months, and he'll eventually figure it out. So all of that work now is incredibly easy to do. You can just go into React, and I can spin you up a login page in about 5 minutes. And with Copilot, it's even quicker. So do we need that engineer?
Well, that was sort of the point, that the thing that I was thinking about with, when everyone was like freaking out about DeepSeek AI as well, right? It's like, as this stuff gets better and better, it's not, I wouldn't even say that it's that we don't need juniors, it's that we don't really like what a software developer even isn't what it currently is. It's just a person who's like I've seen actual job postings for prompt engineer, right? Like someone who just knows how to prompt an AI to do shit for them.
Yeah. And
which is, I guess it's a skill, but it's a much easier skill to learn, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, anybody with half a brain can coax an AI into saying whatever they want. Part of it too, though, is a lot of your software engineering is the product management side. It's kind of just figuring out what the app is supposed to do.
Right.
And so while previously you would need a team of 5 engineers to go build you an app, now you need two senior engineers who know what they're doing to build you an app. And then 90% of your work is communicating with the product manager and figuring out what you're supposed to build, not how you're supposed to build it.
But if you had a product manager who was also a prompt engineer, then you really kind of wouldn't need any engineers, right? You just have the product manager.
Yeah, until they get themselves into a hole they can't dig themselves out of. Right, because
that's the that's the thing. There's always the like Java works great until you run into a problem with garbage collection, and you don't know how garbage collection works because you've only written higher level languages, right? Like,
and then you got to bring in the
prompt engineer works great until something's not working with the code that the chatbot wrote for you, and you don't know how to debug it.
Or more importantly, you didn't do your systems design, and you had 6 people in a room just prompt engineering their way to a fully featured app, and now it costs $3,000 a month to run, and nobody knows how to fix anything when it's broken, right? Like there's a part of systems design, there's a part of architecture that goes into being a senior engineer that you can't just hand off to people writing 100 lines of ChatGPT at a time.
Yeah, although I've seen similar problems with legacy systems at bigger companies already, where like they'll have some mainframe app that was written in Ada, right? And nobody knows how that works either. So, it's kind of, there's always like shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, in the future, the software engineer might just be the guy you talk to when your prompt doesn't work.
Yeah, he fixes your shit.
Yeah,
when your prompt
he's like a glorified IT prompt guy who goes in and looks at the code it spit out and fixes it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, all of that is to say that like help desk guys don't get paid that well.
True, true. But, that's very high skilled help desk there.
It is. So do you think that um, if you're one of those software engineers, the few remaining software engineers, uh, you'll still be sort of garnering a high middle class income?
I think it really depends because so if we to answer that we have to take a step back, right? So if we're going and we see the dry powders increasing at the VCs, right? They have a bunch of money to spend. Okay, the big tech is in a layoff cycle right now, and they're going to have to switch to a hiring cycle again. That might coincide at the same time that dry powder fund starts draining. And then if Trump manages to lower interest rates even a point, I think you're going to
Which he has indicated that he plans on
correct,
doing, right?
correct. And then you also have the problem of nobody who's graduated in the last 2 to 3 years can find a job, or at least a good one. Right? There's
Well,
high unemployment.
depending on race and gender, I would
Oh, yes, yes.
say.
But I mean, with the DEI gone, that's going to change too.
Yeah, hopefully that's the hope.
Businesses are going to have to start reviewing their DEI hiring.
Yeah.
So you might have a catalyst event where kind of senior plus engineers are in high demand again for another year, 2, 3 years, 4 years, however long it is, before that market quells as well. Now, to coincide this is the H-1B problem, which our dear boy Vivek loves.
Yeah, and Elon loves.
Oh yeah, loves them.
H-1Bs as well because he was one. Although I
Well,
guess he kind of backed off of that with the shitstorm on X
well,
a while ago.
his engineering talent on the Doge site shows that he is in fact an H-1B visa.
Aficionado, are they all Indian? They're not Indians.
No.
Big Balls is white.
They left the database open
Who did the
on the Doge Gov
Doge
site.
did?
Yeah, they left the database open. Anybody could post to it. There was no security on it.
On the one that they made?
Yeah, for Doge.gov. There was no security on it. So, improper H-1B fashion. No security on the website.
That does sound like some H-1B nonsense. But I know that Big Balls is white. I've seen his picture.
Yeah.
I for one stand with Big Balls.
I mean, I like what they're doing. I like what Doge is doing. It was just making a joke about Elon.
Well, I know that he does like the H-1Bs.
He does.
And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say right now we have 780,000 H-1Bs.
At least, right?
Of which 80+% are tech. So
right.
625 odd thousand jobs are H-1B visas.
And those guys, so the problem with them, I wrote a bit about this already, is like the way that they're being marketed to us. And for people who don't actually know really anything about the tech sector, this seems reasonable. They always tell you, the tech CEOs will tell you, oh, we need good people, and there's not enough STEM talent in the United States. These lazy millennials or boomer or zoomers or whatever are not getting STEM degrees, and so we have to import the best and the brightest from all over the world in order to be globally competitive. And that's sort of the way that it's marketed. But you and I both know, having worked in the startup world and having worked in the job stacking grift market, that H-1Bs don't work at startups typically. I've never seen an H-1B at a startup. They work at these bigger companies, and they're maintaining legacy code bases, and they're writing kind of shit tier applications, and they don't do a particularly good job, and they're not innovating, and they're not the best and the brightest. But they are cheaper, right? Like you could pay a H1B 90K a year to be
Yeah.
a mid tier software engineer, which is dog shit.
Yeah, I mean, like the analogy I like to use is if you asked an H1B to change your oil, they would take the entire engine out of your car, turn it upside down, drain all the oil, put it back in, and then add some more oil. And when everything works like that, you wonder why none of the software in this country works.
Yeah.
Like every legacy system in this country, for the most part, from any major tech company, is maintained by an H1B visa holder, and they are piling on code to just keep it running. There's no cleanliness, there's no innovation, there's no thinking outside the box, right? It's something to note here too is H1Bs aren't the highest educated people from around the world. The H1B program is 75% Indian, 11% Chinese. The rest of the world makes up barely any of it. And 80% of the people that come in on H1Bs are tech workers, the rest of them are finance. So there's no there.
And India's not exactly leading the world in the technology sector.
No. India is not the Germany of cars, right?
Yeah.
You know, you don't go to India to find the best engineers. Like everyone knows that. In India, it's a cultural thing to not tell your boss he's wrong.
Right.
So a lot of them will get some requirements that are slightly off because that happens all the time in software. You don't understand the full problem, so you say, do this. And instead of going back to the boss and saying, hey, these requirements are a little off, maybe we should do this instead. I think this is what we want to do. They just do it anyway.
Well, when we were working with that offshore team,
yeah, they would do
that.
They would do exactly what I told them.
Crazy shit.
They
would do crazy shit. They would look at the mock-ups, and if the person who made the mock-ups made a component like slightly the wrong color, because we had a color palette, like a branding palette for the company, and if they made it slightly the wrong color, rather than just be like, oh, he meant to make it, blue too, they would go and add a new color into the color palette just to make this one thing that color, because they were like, well, that's what the mock-up is. And it's like, you couldn't have asked for clarification on that. Like, you could have been like, hey, are you sure you want this to be slightly different shade of blue as everything else in the app? Right.
Oh yeah, they had 36 different button classes because the designers' buttons were slightly different, very slightly different than the off-the-shelf buttons with our framework. So they just made their own. And for every place that they needed a button, they made a new class. And they copied and pasted the same 350 lines of code everywhere into new button after new button after new button. And it took 3.5 weeks to remove all of these buttons.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And then you wonder why the project barely runs on your $3,000 MacBook.
Yeah, why it's so fucking slow, and why there's like a million lines of code for this fairly straightforward mobile app.
Yeah, they did exactly what they were told.
We've got 500,000 lines of button code. That's why.
It's like the genie. H1Bs are like the genie that gives you exactly what you wish for.
Yeah, they're a fucking trap from D&D.
Yeah,
like, oh, you didn't say it quite right.
And we did have engineers over there that we taught to question us. So we taught them, hey, no, don't do exactly what I say. Do tell me I'm wrong, right? It took 2 months working with one engineer to convince him to tell me that I was wrong when I made small mistakes. But you just get for free out of an American. So
yeah, Americans love telling you you're wrong.
Yeah, that's half our country.
Yeah.
So no, the program's a definite detriment. If you were to cancel the program tomorrow, you'd get rid of 500, 600,000 software engineers. which coincidentally is the amount of software engineers we've laid off since 2020.
Right. Well, that's the other thing, right? Is like when at the same time that they're saying, well, we don't have enough STEM, we have to import STEM, they're laying people off. So like clearly there's people, right? Because there's too many apparently because you're laying people off. So you can't tell me that you need to import cheap labor in order to maintain these legacy strawberry patches
Well,
while at the same
in a business where your only expenses are labor and hosting, right?
right.
Hosting naturally gets cheaper over time because computers get faster. The only other way you can cut costs is devaluing labor. So the
Right.
fact that Amazon and Google and Cognizant and even Elon's little companies are all trying to devalue labor, it makes sense because it's the only way to get your costs down.
But in defense of these companies, perhaps, especially with ChatGPT, and I mean, you could spin up. We were talking to a buddy of ours right before the show with about Fast API, which is a Python framework that you can spin up a new website backend in like 5 minutes. Again, it's literally Fast API, and it comes with Swagger docs and all this stuff built in. It's my new favorite thing. But that does mean that what took someone in the early 2000s in Java like a long time to get done, you can do a lot faster and a lot more. Like Python is a lot more semantically close to English, and that's why they use it for data science. Is like a lot of these data scientists who aren't software engineers by trade necessarily can pick up Python pretty easily. So like while you're making programming easier and more syntactically like simple, and more people can pick it up, it also does mean that more people can pick it up. So therefore, if you're looking at it like that and you're saying like, why am I paying people $200,000 a year to do this? Like, I could probably find someone to do it for 100,000, and maybe they won't do it quite as good, but they'll do it good enough. And I'm not even a tech company because every company has an IT department. Every company has a website or an app, right? Walmart is not. You don't think of Walmart as a tech company, but they have a website, right? And it's got
Millions of users.
pretty millions of users and a pretty advanced ordering system, and they're recommending you products based on your history, and like all that is code. So every company needs to do something, but and if they can do it cheaper with Indians, then it doesn't necessarily. I do see their perspective on it, which is why I think that software engineering is going to be basically like the new accounting, right? Like an accountant, like we still need accountants, but we have all this accounting software, and it's like algebra,
Well,
right?
really,
And
writing code is the new Excel, right?
yeah, exactly. And you can get paid 60,000 a year to do Excel monkey job at an accounting department. And it's not like a terrible job, but it's not that good.
Oh, I mean,
And I feel like that's the way that.
it kind of is a terrible job when you consider the price
Well,
of
compared to like
food.
Starbucks barista.
Well, compared to Starbucks barista, but like compared to the price of food nowadays, at the price
Right.
of general cost of living, like 60 grand
Is not great.
yeah,
It's
like
not great.
Sam's Club starts you off at 27 an hour, okay? Costco starts you off at
Does it?
32 an hour. So you could make 60 grand a year working at
Does
Costco.
Wait, Costco starts you out at $32 an
After
hour?
the newest
Is
union
this
vote, yeah, the base salary at Costco is
Oh,
32 an hour.
Costco's
Yep.
unionized because there was this dust up. There was this dust up recently about the Chris Rufo. Did you see that? Where he was talking about like Chipotle pays you like $27 an
Yeah.
hour or something. So I don't know how true that was, but yeah, if they're unionized, they might have like, I mean, $32 an hour to work at a grocery store essentially is pretty.
Yeah, like you work at Costco, like what do you do? Like,
Well, you have to drive to work. You can't work remote. That's the only problem.
yeah, but who's more than 20 minutes away from Costco?
I actually don't know where the closest Costco is to me, but I get your point.
Yeah.
Like I could go work at the Walmart.
Yeah, you go work at Walmart, you go work at Costco, you know,
Food
like you
Lion.
go
I
to
could work at
Costco
Food
and like
Lion.
there's somebody just standing there by the card reader to make
Welcome to
sure that you
Costco. I
like
love you.
yeah. They say, "Hi, welcome to Costco," and you scan your card and go, "Thanks." Like that's a great
Yeah,
job. Okay. So I could stand there for $32 an hour.
yeah. Did the guy that stands there gets $32 an hour now?
The guy that stands there gets $32 an hour at Costco.
Okay. If you're a young Zoomer listening to this and you don't have a job, you need to get your ass down to the local Costco and you need to become a Costco greeter. You need to be Costco maxing.
Yeah. And then
Forget software engineering.
yeah.
Software engineering is fake and gay. You should be a Costco greeter.
Then
You can meet women
when you
that
get
way.
off of work, okay, you got the Costco food court right there. Right?
Yeah, you can eat at the Costco.
So you're making $32 an hour, and then you can have 2 hot dogs for lunch and pay $3.27.
Boom, that's only like a tenth of an hour.
Yeah. So you're just and then you get a pizza, you
Now
take that home.
you shouldn't be eating hot dogs and pizzas because RFK will put you in a camp.
They have a salad at Costco.
You get the salad, and you drink water.
Yep.
Maybe a LaCroix. LaCroix's on Fridays.
Yeah, that's a treat. That's
Yeah.
a treat.
Your Friday treat, LaCroix.
Yeah.
And you work at Costco.
And then you can buy the big carton of eggs before everybody else gets to it. That's your breakfast every day.
There you go.
Free eggs.
You could get a van. Okay, so there was a group of guys a few years back that were like very into jujitsu, and they were living the van life in the parking lot of the jujitsu gym, and they would because the gym has like a shower and a sauna and all that stuff, and it was in the same plaza as like a Food Lion, so like you could basically live at the gym, and that's basically what these guys were doing, was just living at the gym. You could turn your Costco maxing lifestyle into like you could get a van and park it in the Costco parking lot, and you could sleep in the van, and you could have like a little grill, a little propane grill, and you could cook up the eggs in the parking lot before work. You could do body weight exercises in the parking lot. You could do push-ups. This is not a bad life.
Well, I mean, with $32 an hour,
Yeah,
you're making about what, 3,100
yeah.
after tax?
And you just put all that into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, $36,000 a year savings.
$36,000 a year in Bitcoin. You're in the best
Post-tax.
shape of your life.
Yeah.
This is the way.
Do that for 10 years, and all of a sudden you're a multimillionaire just living in the Costco.
Yeah, you could sleep with the female Costco employees.
True, and I mean, you'd probably be so bored in your van that you could walk across the streets to, I don't know, the Sheets or whatever, and get a job there for $20 an hour overnight.
You could work the night shift at Sheets.
Yeah, 22 an hour night shift at Sheets.
Boom, there you go. You're working the day shift.
$1,000 a year.
Day shift at Costco. You take a 4-hour nap. Night shift at Sheets. Then another 4-hour nap, and then you're back to Costco.
Yep.
I think we've got this. I mean, I think that we have solved the problems. I think we've solved everyone's problems.
Yeah.
You don't need tech. You don't need tech.
You don't need tech. You just need retail.
Yeah.
Okay? Retail is the new tech.
Retail maxing. Retail is the new tech. You need to work at Costco and Sheets simultaneously. So you're job stacking retail. I think people do this. I don't think we invented this. I think people do this by necessity. I think people do this by necessity.
Yeah, people have to work at Costco and get a second job because they need the money. But when a house is $500,000 in a decent metropolitan area,
yeah,
you can't blame them.
Do you think the housing prices are going to crash in DC though? Have you seen the Zillow and DC, like all these feds that are getting fired, they're putting their houses on the market?
The DC market was bad. Okay, the
Was
DC
it?
market has been bad for 5 or 6 years. You could get I watched the price of luxury apartments on the Metro line go down.
Really? In like
Yeah,
2019? You're saying 5 years
fr-
ago?
from 2015 when I lived in DC Metro until 2018, 2017, 2018, the prices of luxury apartments on the Metro line went down. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I sold my condo in Fairfax for more than I paid for it.
Well, that's because it's Fairfax. Everything in Fairfax was up, but everything else on the Metro line. I'm
Okay.
talking blue line, I'm talking silver line, I'm talking red line.
Green line was always trash.
Green line was always trash. Orange line was Fairfax and Vienna. But
Yeah.
like the red line up into Silver Springs, right? The nicer metro stops up there. Yeah, you can have a nice luxury apartment for 1,500, $1,600 a month, and you don't need a car.
Yeah, because you can take the metro.
Hell, I was paying more for an apartment down in North Carolina, South Carolina area than I was for than I've seen friends pay for apartments in Silver Springs, Maryland.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So the at a certain point, DC basically banned cars, and they banned cars by getting rid of all of the parking.
Sure.
So commutes
So,
into DC became nothing, but you just couldn't find a place to park,
yeah.
right? Which is smart for how that city's structured.
Yeah.
So everybody was on the metro, and so that's the only thing you can really judge housing prices on is the metro cost.
And
But yeah,
prices were going down.
prices have been going down in DC.
Why do you
Like
think that
even
is? Because, I mean, there's been demand for housing as the government's grown, I would imagine.
no, nobody wants to live there, right?
Oh, so people work there, but they all commute in from Northern Virginia and Maryland.
Well, not anymore. Now it's
Oh,
just
well,
Northern
then it
Virginia.
went, then it went,
It,
oh, so when COVID, when everyone started working remote, you're saying
yeah.
that
Well,
because
it, it
a lot of these people, when they were told that they had to come back to the office, like they're on, Twitter or whatever, talking about how they live too far away, they can't commute to DC, right? So they moved during the pandemic, assuming they would never have to work in the office ever again, which seems kind of like a dumbass thing to think. Although I don't plan on working in the office ever again. I'm not gonna move to fucking Wyoming.
well, think about it this way, right? So DC's been on a slow property decline since 2015.
Okay.
Um, the only place that has experienced a boom is the Virginia side.
Yeah.
Fairfax, Arlington, all the way down to Woodbridge and Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to live on the Maryland side. Nobody wanted to live in DC proper.
Yeah. Well, there are reasons for that.
You- There's a lot of reasons for that if you've ever been in that area.
there's like
I,
there's
I
like
assume most.
13% reasons. Like,
Well, in those areas, it's more like 34% reasons. But um, the exodus was already happening into
yeah.
the suburbs, right? The government was getting lax on remote work, so people would only have to come in 2, 3 days a week. And then COVID hit, and then people just left,
Yeah.
right? And who wants to live in DC
When
when the
everything's shut
entire
down.
place is locked down,
Right. Well, that
right?
happened in New York and shit too, right? Like,
Well, you have your one-bedroom apartment that costs you $3,000 a month, and
yeah.
then you can't go out to the restaurants, and you can't go out to the dinner places, and you can't go to the office. So you're just sitting in your shitty apartment. Hell, they don't even want to let you in the park. So the only possible thing to do is to completely leave the town and go do something in Virginia
yeah.
or Maryland or Delaware. Uh, there just wasn't anything to do in the city itself.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And now the few people that are still left are like either taking the resignation offer or they're getting downsized. I saw that 1,000 feds from the Department of Veterans Affairs just got laid off,
Yep.
which is, you know,
And I
good.
mean, even if you're not getting laid off, right? The smart thing to do is to sell your house now.
Yeah, before it's worth less.
Yeah, before it's worth less, and then rent. And then if you lose your job renting, you can move in a year, you know, as opposed to being stuck with a house that's worth $200,000 less than you paid for it. And mind you, these are not just houses; these are mostly like apartment
Condos.
buildings or condos
Yeah.
or townhouses where you have an insane $600, $700, $800 a month HOA fee.
Yeah, that one bedroom apartment that I sent you in Georgetown that they were wanting 600,000 for, and I was like, offer them a 150, right? But then you were like, well, yeah, except there's an $800 a month HOA.
Yeah. So that with base raw utilities, because you have to pay for the power and the water to be hooked up still,
Yeah,
and then you have to pay some semblance of taxes. You're going to be carrying that for at least $1,200 a month.
yeah.
And you're like, okay, do I want a DC apartment for $1,200 a month? Hell no.
Hell
Never going to
no.
rent that thing.
Hell
It's
no.
worth 40 grand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see. Um, you would think that the return to office would actually negate the property decline.
Right, because people who don't want to lose their job, like there are some people who don't want to lose their job and who did move away and are going to have to move back,
Yeah. You got
and so
people in
they're going
like
to have to buy
rural
those.
Pennsylvania or bumfuck Maryland, just who live 2 hours from the office. They're going to get tired of that 2 hour commute really fast, and they're just going to get a place in DC again.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I would definitely not want to. Dude, commuting just sounds so terrible to me right now. Like I'm so used to just rolling out of bed and being like, well, I'm gonna make some coffee and then I guess I'm gonna like check my Slack and then uh, fuck off for an hour and then maybe do some work. Right? Like having to put on pants and go to the office just sounds like not what I'm trying to do. But maybe that makes me kind of like there's a meme online of the guys that wear the not sweatpants. What are those? Pajama pants? Pajama. You know what I'm talking about?
But neat.
No, no, no. Well, no, like neats, but with jobs. So the pajama pants class, like the sort of pseudo intellectual laptop job guy who works from his house in his pajama pants, and people kind of hate on that guy, and I am kind of that guy, but
Well, why? Well, here's the counter argument to that, right? Like, if you could make $100,000 a year more, would you get into the office?
um, a hundred
And the
thousand dollars a year
office
more.
and the office let you drink there.
Well, the last office I was in did let me drink there. They actually had to lock the taps before noon though because people were, let's say, abusing the privilege. But
Well, that's bold of them for locking them and not taking them away.
yeah, like they had a key thing that it was like a bike lock, and so like you couldn't use the tap, and and then they would take it off at noon.
I'd come in
It
there
was
with
like,
bolt cutters.
yeah, you can't drink before noon at work, sir. But like an extra 100 grand. Okay, does that
Like,
include job stacking, like an extra 100 grand on top of what I get from working two jobs, or
well, no, 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 no. You can only work one job, right? You have to go into the office. We'll call it 4 days a week.
all right?
Um,
Let's put up some real numbers though. Like so, if I'm making 150 in my remote job, are you talking
let's
about
say
250,
yeah.
or are you saying I have two remote jobs where I'm making?
Well, no, let's take some real numbers here. So like right now in our area,
Yeah,
a decent software engineer is making or an okay software engineer is making 150,000 a year,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So if you could get $250,000 a year to be a
to
decent software engineer, maybe 300 if you're really good,
yeah,
right? And then you got to come put on some pants, put on a button up, show up to an office. You go out to lunch every day at the office, you know. Standard nice office fare.
yeah.
I mean, would you do that?
Well, so the answer is no, because I can make more than that by job stacking remotely. Like if I'm making 150 at one job and like 120 at the other job, then I'm making 270.
True.
And I'm also like I don't have to commute, and I can also help out with like the chickens and stuff like that around the house. So like I would realistically, it would have to be more than it would have to be more than two jobs worth of pay for me. Now we might not have that option because a lot of companies are going hybrid now. They're really pushing the return to office.
I mean, they are. I think it's a kind of a feigned exercise, though.
Well, it's a question of who. It's a question of it's the art of the deal, right? It's like who's gonna pussy out, right? Like if everyone refuses hybrid roles, then they're gonna have to go to remote. But if everyone else cucks and starts accepting hybrid roles, and you're the only one holding out, like you're just gonna be unemployed.
Well, think about it with a little bit more attention to not just the next 3 months, right? But think about it in the term of the next 3 years.
Right.
So all of these companies that are going to force their employees to return to work, the exceptional employees,
Are gonna leave if they can.
they're going to leave, right?
Yeah. And
They're going to try their
there are still
hardest.
remote jobs out there because I've had a few phone screens in because I rage quit one of my jobs last week, so I've had a couple phone screens and setting up some interviews for some remote jobs, so like they do still exist.
Yeah, I mean they're always going to exist to some extent because people are going to want the slightly cheaper labor.
Yeah,
Because the fact of the matter is you have to pay more for an in-person.
yeah,
You can always get away paying slightly less for a remote. So they're always going to be remote. But your top tier employees are going to leave
yeah,
when you do your return to office, right? You're just going to keep the ones that can't find a new job.
exactly.
So you're gonna lower the overall quality of your staffing to appease who? HR? Like, is HR just bored and they want to?
I think generally,
Yeah, like my company's doing return to work
yeah,
right now, and I basically just said make me a contractor, and I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to show up regardless. I don't
yeah,
care. I can
yeah.
find
Because
another job.
well, and you have two right now, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm working 2 days
Because
a well right now.
this is the first one that you had.
This is the
So
first one. They didn't
without
pay a bonus.
without doxing ourselves, you and I were both working at a startup company like
Yes.
6 months ago, and you were actually my boss at that time. We've hired each other back and forth at different jobs throughout the years. You hired me in this particular one, and yet at that time you weren't stacking because you were in a management position. You were actually making decent money and had a lot of responsibility.
Oh yeah, I
So
mean I was making over 200,000 a year.
yeah. So you weren't stacking at that time. And then when that company went out of business for all of the things that you're talking about with the VCs and they didn't have a revenue model and shit, you had to get something.
Yeah.
So
And I mean it wasn't a bad deal.
yeah.
Like it was an okay job. It paid less.
Yeah.
But I negotiated full remote after I moved because I moved away from the office. Not that far, but far enough to be annoying.
Yeah.
And they also didn't pay a bonus this year. So I'm kind of on the warpath of I'm not coming in.
Right. And you and since then you did get a second job, so even if like if they kick you or if they not kick you out, they probably do you think they would fire you or do you think that they would just make it like uncomfortable until you try to make you quit, you know what I mean?
Well, the problem with it is I kind of don't care about uncomfortableness because I'll just ignore you.
Yeah.
Right? Like
You can't uncomfortable me. That's
yeah, like you they don't really want to tell me I can work full remote, because if they did, then it would cause a,
Then
well,
everyone
why
could.
does this guy get to do it, not
Yeah,
me, right? And that's already starting. The cracks already starting to show on that for other teams, of people getting pissed off at each other because of exceptions and all that.
yeah.
And so I just negotiated 1099 with them, and I was like,
Oh,
hey,
so you did, because I know you were talking about doing that.
yeah, yeah. I
You did
just
do
went
that.
to him. I said, hey, you didn't pay me the bonus. You didn't play the games over here, so let's just move me to 1099. We can be done with this, and then I'll work remote. And then you have a reason to go and tell all the other little Timmies why I'm remote and they're not. It's,
Yeah,
hey, he's not an employee here; he's a contractor, and he doesn't get health insurance,
yeah. You could
which I
pick.
don't care about.
You can pick remote or health insurance.
Yeah, and go and tell them that, and they'll be like, "Oh, I want the health insurance,"
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Uh, so I pitched that to them. Look, I mean, if they want to fire me, they can fire me.
Right.
I don't care at this point. Uh, they've gotten a reasonable offer. I'm a reasonable businessman,
I
and
consider
we'll see if
myself
they
a
follow it.
reasonable gentleman.
Hey, I mean, if they fire me, I'm just going to turn around and tell them, hey, remember what you were going to pay me? This is what you're going to have to pay me when you want me back in 3 months to do contract work to keep your lights on, because they don't know how anything works there.
Yeah,
So, I mean, the moral of the story is just be valuable, know something that nobody else knows, and
yeah.
then basically control a domain where you are kind of the only person on that domain,
Yeah,
and keep that domain as clean as possible.
you've talked about that before, I think, like where, because this is kind of like one of those things, and this was one of the things that I hated at the company that I just quit. It was full of H1Bs, and they were all very provincial like that, which I understand the tactics of it, but it is frustrating because if you're coming in and you're new on the team and you're like, hey, I need somebody to like do my AWS permissions. And it's like, oh, only one guy can do that because he's the only one who knows how that like where like has access. Like they had a lot of access controls like
Oh,
in place
that's
and all that kind of stuff. And it was just like it was a lot of like it's essentially rent seeking, right? Like one if you can park yourself in a if you can be a bottleneck, then you have job security. And that's kind of like a shitty way to look at it from like that doesn't work in the startup world obviously, right? Because like people have to get shit done. But if you're parking and grifting in a big company, like if you can be a bottleneck, then that's good for you, right? It's bad for the business, but fuck the business, right? Like
I mean, you don't have to do it as maliciously as being a bottleneck,
right.
right?
Well,
You
I
don't
mean,
have
you
to
can
be
be
malicious.
you can be an efficient bottleneck, right? Like, but as long as everything goes through you, then they need you.
Like if you take the worst part of the app that nobody likes or nobody knows how to work on,
Yeah,
and you say, yeah, let that be my job, right? I'm just going to do this all day long,
yeah.
right? And then you're
I'll figure out this spaghetti nonsense and how it works, and I'll make sure
yeah,
it's working.
and then you're going to have like 3 weeks where you hate your life and you're digging through spaghetti nonsense, and then you're going to figure it out, and then you're going to be the go-to guy for that spaghetti nonsense,
Yeah,
and all of the other coworkers are going to be happy.
that they never have to touch spaghetti
Yeah, you
nonsense.
go, you don't have to touch it. I'll touch it for you, right? And then you're politely bogarting an area of the domain where everybody's happy to have you there.
Okay, yeah, I like that better. You know,
Yeah, you don't have to be malicious about it, right? You don't have to like block access to people, because the malicious people always get shit canned eventually.
because they're looking for a way to get rid of you, right? Like they want to get rid of you. It's adversarial at that point.
One tryhard will get hired at your company,
Yeah,
and he will go to your boss and he will say, yeah, I asked for access to this and I couldn't get it. Hey, I asked for how this code works and they wouldn't tell me. Hey, I asked where this thing is and I just get weird responses.
yeah,
And maybe two tryhards get hired, and now you got two people telling the manager, hey, this is a problem. This could burn down your company if you don't, or burn down your project if you don't address this. And all of a sudden, they will find everybody bogarting stuff, and the people that keep bogarting will be fired.
yeah,
Versus if you're on the positive side of it, they'll just say, you could go to your boss, you could say, yeah, I tried to teach so-and-so how this part of the app works, and they didn't really want to do it.
Yeah.
What sounds better? The guy who's sharing knowledge or the guy who's hiding knowledge? So, no, just find the worst part of your app and just work on that. And after 6 months, everybody will forget what you do, and you just can always use it as an excuse.
That's the dream right there. Like,
Oh, I've done that before.
To be the guy on the app that, well, I told you about the time, one of the jobs when I was really going hard in the job stacking in, I think this was 2021. I got hired at a company to do a project, and then the budget for the project got, or like something about the project, they were like, stop the project. So I got put on a different team, and it was like WordPress admin job, and I was like, I don't use WordPress and I don't really want to, so I'm not going to do good at this. I'm going to purposefully like just not try to learn this because it's not useful to my career. And so I did that for like a month, and then they started the new project, or they said something about starting the new project. So I went over there and I skipped the stand up for the other team like 2 days in a row. And they were like, oh, not quite yet. So I went back to the stand up and they didn't call on me. And I was like, oh, I think they think I'm on the other project now. So I just stopped going to that stand up, but the other project hadn't started yet. And for like 3 months, I got paid to do nothing.
Where you want to be.
Everybody just forgot about me.
Well, I mean, they have the money to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It was a big company. They had the money.
Yeah.
And they don't
like
care.
That's
It would be
everybody.
it would be more annoying for them if I was like pestering them for work, because then they'd have to try and find something for me to do. They'd rather I just fade into the background.
Well, how much would it cost them to cut you
and then rehire
right.
somebody
and then wait 3 months and then rehire somebody to do the exact same thing who doesn't even know how to log into their systems?
Exactly.
I'm
doing them a favor.
Yeah, you're just being part of the carry cost.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just an unspoken rule of like, hey, we have these people that don't really do anything, but we need them.
Yeah.
Because they're cheaper.
Exactly.
I think a lot of the problems in tech could be solved by solving that carry problem.
What do you mean by that?
So think about this, right? And I know you've been here before, but I'll tell the story. You get hired into a company.
Yeah.
To build XYZ, right? You build XYZ, you're almost done with it. And then requirements change, and you have to rebuild part of XYZ. And then you're sitting there and the UI needs to change now, so you're rebuilding part of XYZ. Right? Yeah. And you're just stuck in this perpetual loop of just rebuilding the same product or adding things to it every week for
sort of scope creep, and the project's never really done.
Scope creep, the project's never really done. They're changing things for the sake of changing things that don't need to be changed, like the homepage 5 times.
Adding features.
Yeah, adding features that don't need to be there. Making.
I remember that. I remember that happening at a few places that will go unnamed. Yes. Whereas, like, dude, come on, man.
They're like, do we really need that?
Well, we've got these engineers sitting around. We might as well have them build features we don't need.
So it's like, what do you do with your engineers that should be on a bench?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't fire your engineers, because you need somebody who knows how to build your app, who knows how to deploy it, who knows how to upgrade it, who knows where the bones are buried, right? Who remembers how to log into AWS and update your certificates when that needs to happen every year. But whatever it is, the details don't matter.
Yeah.
Tech needs to switch to having constant maintenance contracts.
Yes.
So
I tried to sell maintenance contracts for some of the people that I did contracting for.
Yeah.
People don't want to do it, like, because they don't think, like, they're not thinking strategically.
Instead of having 3 engineers on the bench full time who you're giving stupid work to, instead have 3 engineers on the bench who you're paying the equivalent of 5 to 10 hours a week for, who only show up when problems happen.
Yeah. Maybe that's the business model that we should be pushing in 2025 and beyond. You know, like a
Well,
maintenance company, a tech maintenance company.
it needs to be a cultural shift, right? Because you can hire engineers that know what you're doing, but if you don't continually pay them, they're going to forget how it works.
Well, so
Or
what we need to do is we need to start writing Medium articles under different pseudonyms and start getting that out there, become thought leaders in the software education space, and everyone will start creating buzzwords about maintenance contracts. And then once people are like, oh yeah, maintenance contracts, then we step in and say, oh yeah, we're a maintenance contract company.
sure, true. But you need to take your full-time engineers and you need to convert them to maintenance positions where they have 5 to 10 hours a week of work to do.
Yeah.
And then that'll become a badge of honor for engineers.
Yeah, if you get but if you get converted to 5 to 10 hours, that's not gonna you're not gonna be making the same amount of money.
But then you go get another job.
So it's like legit. It's understood that once you're in maintenance contract mode, you're allowed second jobs
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah, you're expected to get another job, right?
Nobody's expecting you to live on a fifth of your salary.
Yeah. Yeah, you're expected to get another job. Like the retirement strategy would then be for instead of engineers to take a job that they just work, get 3 maintenance contracts.
Yeah, once you've maxed out maintenance contracts, then you're making money and not really doing much.
You're making your original salary and you just have to make sure the lights stay on.
Yeah. Which
right?
if you did your job well the first time shouldn't be a problem.
So the engineers are incentivized to build really simple, clean code that they can maintain.
Yeah.
And then the companies are incentivized to keep paying these people to keep the lights on so they don't have to hire
a bunch of Pajeets.
Wow. A bunch of Patels and Krishnas and Viveks and Tushars and
yeah.
That needs to be the logical path forward for software engineering. And then you solve the problem of both people over engineering shit, people not having stakeholder stuff in it, and then also people building new features constantly that you don't need and just changing stuff for the sake of it. But what do I know?
Well, I think a lot of the problem is that many engineers are like very bug manny, and they like to over engineer shit, and they like to keep doing that kind of shit. Like the business doesn't want you to be over engineering shit. They just don't know any better, and the engineers get to kind of do what they want, right? Like,
well, I mean, that's a separate problem. Like everybody wants to write their own
framework.
Yeah, everybody wants to write their own framework. Even at our last unnamed company.
Oh, I that's immediately what I thought of. Yes.
People wanted to write their own large language models.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you didn't. You must not.
I missed that part. There was a open source project that the one guy wrote that he integrated into the app and then didn't maintain.
Oh yeah.
And when there was an existing one that was like well maintained and like
I remember that. That was our CTO.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Acting CTO. Acting's too polite. Pretending CTO.
Pretending.
No. They wanted to write their own large language model.
Who the fuck wanted to do that? I would obviously say names, but
the same.
Of course.
The same people.
Of course.
The same people.
What if we became an AI company, guys?
Yeah. We'll just do AI. Now, mind you, you couldn't build an app with fucking $20 million that works properly, but
you're gonna build the next fucking open AI.
Yeah, you're gonna build the next healthcare AI. I mean, good on you.
Ugh.
I mean, the whole AI thing's the next bubble, right?
AI is a bubble. I mean, so it's like the LLMs are pretty useful tools. But it is definitely like it's like you brought up briefly the 90s .com bubble, right, where it was like everybody wanted to sell fucking dog food on the internet. It's like, no, you don't understand. This is dogfood.com. Oh, $40 billion valuation, right? Like everybody wants to say that their business is AI somehow, right? Like, oh, it's not. No, we're not just a whatever app. We're not just a fitness app. We have fitness AI. Oh, cool. What, you know what I mean? So like, so
Well,
there's
think about it like a okay. So think about it like you're a director or a C-suite, right?
yeah,
And you work at some random boring company.
yeah,
Okay, you have a couple engineers on staff, you have a couple IT people on staff, you do whatever, it doesn't really matter.
betterhelp.com.
Okay, not a tech company, right? Like just a generic ass company.
Yeah,
And then somebody on your board of directors, because you still have to report to them,
yeah. Like, what's
comes
this
to you.
AI I've been hearing about?
Yeah, he says some boomer who owns
Yeah,
10% of the company, who because he invested $1 billion 20 years ago, 30 years ago, asks you, well, what's this AI thing and what are you doing about it? You have to give him an answer. You can't just say, I don't know.
say
That's
AI
what
doesn't
kids
apply
are
to
doing.
our business, retard.
Yeah. You can't say that, right? You
Yeah,
have to say something in a positive light. So you have to say, well, we're integrating AI into X. Okay. How do you integrate AI into X? You spend money. And then you call up some AI company. Who cares? .ai.
oh, is that taken?
Oh, hold on. Let me go buy it before we
Before we release
publish
this
this
episode.
podcast.
Yeah, whocares.ai. Go to whocares.ai today for your free copy of Mein Kampf.
Whoa. Wow.
Hey, you need to. I'm just saying you need to know about it. You know, I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying that you should read about these things.
True. You need to be educated.
Yeah, you have to do a close reading. Try to
Not a
figure
very good
out.
book.
I actually haven't read it.
The second one is better.
I did hear one thing that was, you know what Hitler got right. So, oh, this is going off the rails. No, the one thing that he said, I believe it was, I read about this. I didn't read the primary sources, but I was reading Adam Toombs, whatever the fuck this guy's name is. What's that book called? Wages of Destruction, which was a pretty normie like take on World War II, but which I'm not necessarily saying is wrong, but he was pointing out that Hitler kind of like was one of the first European politicians to predict the rise of the U.S. superpower. Like he was really more worried about the United States than like Britain or France, and he really saw the eastward march. Like he saw the Volga River as his Mississippi. Like he was going to do manifest destiny east across Eurasia, and he saw the Slavs as like Native Americans, you know, to be put into reservations. And so, like, basically, he was just trying to be like America, which I thought was
That's
interesting.
That's an interesting take. I mean, Europe had that weird, like, it basically had the classist struggle that America didn't have at the time.
They had a populated. He had to go through urban population centers, right? Like, we just had a bunch of buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that too. I mean, it
bunch of
also
bufflers, bunch of bufflers.
like not only does he have this, like, if he wants to take it, he's got the urban population problem, but not only does he have that, he has this like weird classist problem that's been persisting in Europe since really Napoleon, because Napoleon was kind of like the overthrow of the monarchy,
Yeah,
right? And then you had all these populist movements springing up everywhere since the post World War One. You know, you had the anti-monarchy movements, you had the well, mostly just anti-monarchy movements.
sure.
You had
Well,
people switching to communisms, people switching to fascism, people switching to ideologies, democracy even, that weren't
well,
part of the standard framework.
the whole idea of nationalism too is different, right? Like the Habsburg monarchy was not a nation state. It was an empire of a bunch of different nationalities all mixed together. And so, you know, once you decided that each nationality can have the right to self determination, then now empire building in Europe itself is no longer like quote unquote justified, right? Like instead of being a matter of course that like, oh yeah, like of course Prussia would want to try and take this territory from Austria. It's like, oh well, no, because those people are Hungarian or whatever.
Yeah, we don't want them here.
Yeah, we don't want Hungarians. We don't. I like Hungarians personally.
Yeah, personally, they make the best paprika, but
Yes,
and I put that shit on everything.
and they have. I put that shit on everything, and they have the best immigration policies in Europe. Them in
Yeah,
Poland, I guess.
literally zero,
Yeah.
which is what I want here.
Oh yeah.
But
Did you see JD Vance's speech to the Munich Security Conference?
no,
Yeah, dude, it's pretty base. I'll send it to you. He went up there. So it's the Munich Security Conference. So they're all there talking about like Russia, right? Like, oh, how are we going to defend against Russia? And he goes in there and he's like, you guys are talking a lot about what you're going to defend yourselves from, but what are you defending yourselves for if you don't have free speech and you don't have freedom of religion and you have open borders? Like, America's not paying for this. Like go fuck yourselves, basically. And like, and every like the whole room is silent. You hear like two people clapping, and it's like, well, that's probably the Polish delegation. Like,
I mean it's true though. Like, who cares?
yeah,
You know, you don't. Nationalism is dead.
yeah.
I don't think you have any countries left that can even remotely claim to be nationalist.
Hungary,
Uh,
Hungary, and Poland.
I don't know. The cracks start to form. Maybe old Yugoslavia.
That's not even a real country anymore.
Yeah, no, but I mean like all the countries within Yugoslavia, like
Oh, you mean like,
Croatia and
yeah,
Serbia and
no,
Bosnia. Like they have some pretty strong nationalist
the Eastern,
reasons to be
the,
nationalists.
the East. It's funny because the Eastern Europeans, the people who were behind the Iron Curtain, are like they're the ones that are like super nationalist, even though they were trying like this whole Soviet thing was they were trying to build the international commissars or whatever, communist international. And then the Western Europeans who were supposedly like the nationalists or like more nationalist type are like the ones that are like very globalist now, right? So it's almost like polarity shifting or something.
I mean, it's a progression, right? Nationalism was always the populist movement.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had a proper populist movement in the West in oh geez, since Vietnam. Yeah, since
What was in
Vietnam, we haven't had proper.
who was the populist in during Vietnam?
Well, so in that era, we had, and I'm not saying I agree with these people, but we had the Weather Underground, right? We had William Ayers, Obama's best buddy,
Yeah.
and Susan Rosenberg, the head of Black Lives Matter, who literally bombed the Capitol building.
Yeah.
Not metaphorically, literally put a bomb in the Capitol building and detonated it.
Yeah.
You had the Black Panther movements,
Well,
right?
they were black nationalists for sure.
They were black nationalists. Even if you go back to the '60s, when you have George Lincoln Rockwell.
Would you give Georgia to Louis Farrakhan
100%.
and just let it be like, okay, you guys can have Georgia?
100%. I think there's a lot of animosity
Yeah,
between races, and it was dwindling in the 90s, and it got rekindled
yeah. Almost like
throughout.
it's beneficial to certain groups.
Oh, I mean, it 1000% is, but I mean, racism was practically gone in the 90s, and it got brought up again.
Well, they had. I
Um,
mean, they had. What's his name? Rodney King. Rodney King was in the
that,
'90s.
that was early 90s. That
Yeah, but
was,
they had race riots in the '90s. I mean, like,
yeah, and then we got a lot better after the race riots. By the late 90s, there was
it was those rooftop Koreans. They sort of thinned out the numbers, is what you're saying?
they thinned out the problems. You know, then they closed their shops in LA and opened them up everywhere around the world. But no, like we kind of solved racism in the 90s, the 2000s, and then it got brought back out of nowhere with the DEI stuff, just so people could line their pocketbooks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was definitely a grift, right? But
Oh, it's 1000% a grift. Like look at Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson.
Now Al Sharpton appreciates a nice suit. I will say that.
Well, you mean he dresses well, but
I appreciate a man in a nice suit.
hey, man, the devil wears Prada. Okay.
I guess that's true. No, I like Al Sharpton. I think he should be president.
Uh, you know,
He could be president of Georgia, the new
yeah, yeah.
the
If
new
that's what it takes
independent state of Georgia.
if that's what it takes to fix the racial problems in the United States, sure, give them all to Georgia.
Yeah.
I don't
The only
care.
problem is there's a bunch of white people in Georgia that would be like not happy about it. But they'd have to move.
It's fine.
You
Yeah,
gotta
move on.
go. You gotta
Gotta
go.
go. Gotta go. This
Hey,
is how we fix it. This is how we fix this problem in the United States permanently.
yeah.
Okay?
And we can have security agreements with Georgia. You know.
We can have security agreements. We can have border agreements, right? They can have their own military. They'll have plenty of ports. They'll have Charleston.
Yeah.
Give them all of Georgia,
Yeah.
all of it, and then
I
just
think
end
that's
the
fair.
conversation forever.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, then when if anybody ever complains, it's like, well, you got Georgia.
Yeah. Well, it's like
Like,
Israel, right? Like we gave
yeah,
we just got to give the Jews Israel, and then it's like, okay, well, we'll just go to Israel. What are you complaining about?
yeah. I mean, you have your own state,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they get to be nationalists, but nobody else does.
Yes.
You know.
Well, let's see. Are there any? Japan is nationalist.
It's dwindling, surprisingly.
That's unfortunate.
Uh, Japanese nationalism is on the
Decline.
express train to non-existence right now.
Oh, really? I had not heard
It's
about
about to
this.
commit seppuku.
Oh
Uh,
no. Oh
yeah.
no.
So Japan is having a population crisis
Well, I knew that.
along with their money printing crisis.
Oh, I did hear something about they're doing dumb shit with the yen.
Well, it's not that they've been. It's not that they did. It's not that they've been doing dumb stuff. It's that they've did done stuff. Yeah, they've done.
They printed a bunch of yens.
Yes, yes.
They printed yens. We got too many
They
yens floating around.
they did dumb stuff years ago, and they're still recovering from that.
Need to hike those bond rates.
They were printing money like crazy in the mid 2000s,
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
right? And they even went negative with their interest rates.
Ooh, did they? I know. Didn't the EU
Yeah,
go negative with interest rates as well?
Germany, the Bundesweisers,
The
what is it?
Bund, the Bund. We could call them the Bund.
The Bund went negative as well.
God,
Uh,
imagine that. Imagine having to pay for a bond instead of buying. Instead of
that's
like,
where they got. Well, they forced corporations to keep their money in him,
yeah. Well,
right?
I
That's the
mean,
only thing
no
backing
one,
those governments.
nobody would voluntarily keep their money in an asset with negative interest rates in it.
Yeah, well,
That's fucking
that's what happened to Germany
bananas.
and Japan.
That's fucking
And so
bananas.
Japan is suffering a population problem,
Yeah.
but I'm fully under the impression that they don't need to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean the elites don't want you to know this, but you can actually make more Japanese people at home.
I have 6 of them in my
I've got 6 Japanese. I've got
Yeah.
I've got half Japanese to be
Yeah,
perfectly.
I've got 6 half Jap, which
I've
means I
got,
have 3 whole
which is
Japanese
like
just
3
sitting
whole
upstairs.
Japanese.
Yeah. I've been making them like crazy. It only takes like 9 months per.
Yeah, and you can parallelize it.
Yeah, you can make it parallel. I can make like 500 Japanese in my lifetime. Net Japanese, not full Japanese.
Net Japanese. I can make 500 net Japanese.
No. They're fine. I mean, even Larry Fink came out and said it. He said, declining population centers aren't the worst thing. Right? You don't need to be focused on this infinite growth. But now one thing you do need to do in a deflationary economy.
You need 2.1.
No, you don't.
You need a replacement rate.
No, you don't.
Why do you say?
You can create a deflationary economy if you have nationalism.
No, I know. No, I didn't mean 2.1% inflation. I meant 2.1% birth rate. Like you need a replacement rate for your population. I guess you could have population decline.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is you can be a declining population if you move towards a nationalized society that's export focused.
So you're talking about
the Japanese are.
Are you talking about like quality versus quantity? Is that what you're trying to? So
yeah, I mean, if you're Japan, right? You have big manufacturing facilities. You have Mitsubishi, all these like historic Nissan, Mazda, Honda, Toyota, like historical big name manufacturing companies, Yamaha. You can automate those, right? Still have a high export percentage, and then use those exports to cover your declining population. And I mean, real estate market will suffer.
But you have to bottom. You have to bottom out at some point. Like you can't just continuously decline. You're gone.
No, you'll naturally bottom out at some point, right? If Japan became empty and houses became $0,
then people would just start having more kids because there's space.
Yeah, right. If there's tons of space in Japan, people just have a bunch of kids because why not? It's something to do.
Yeah. The process of creating them is generally enjoyable.
Yeah. If Japan were to automate in its economy in such a way that they brought back single parent working households where only one parent needs to work, the birth rates in Japan would skyrocket.
Yeah.
Housing is already cheap over there, right? We're already seeing the effects of it. You can go and buy a house in Japan for $100,000.
Really?
And you could buy a really nice house for $300,000.
I should buy a house in Japan.
Now
I know how to say hi, which is Japanese for yes.
You just need to say hi in Sapporo. Like that's it. That's it. If you can drink a beer.
And kawaii is your pretty.
Yeah. But no, houses in Japan are extremely cheap. Even in like Tokyo prefectures, you can get something for the equivalent price that you get something in a smaller American metro for.
Okay.
Smaller American metro, like
you don't hear about Japanese expats or like expats to Japan.
They're starting to open it, right? So they're starting to allow foreigners to buy houses.
They don't love white people in Japan, though.
No, they don't. Right? You got to eat the culture if you're going to be there.
Yeah, you kind of got to be. You kind of got to be a weeb.
Well, no, you don't have to be a weeb. You just have to eat the rest of the culture, right? You have to be ultra polite. No jaywalking, no littering. No being loud and boisterous in public.
Who would do that? What kind of American would do that? We should implement some of those features of Japanese society here, I think.
Well, how do you do that, right? I mean, in Japan, it's 100% culture based.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Like, Japan is objectively the highest trust society in the entire world,
Yeah.
right? Like you can trust your neighbor more in Japan than you can anywhere else in the world.
I mean, I trust my neighbor, but
Yeah, but how much?
I live in the woods.
But like for generic day-to-day things on average, right? Maybe you trust your neighbor more in the bumfuck woods of a certain mid-Atlantic
Midwest.
East Coast state,
Sure.
uh, who might be Georgia. Um,
Oh
but
no, Georgia's really going downhill.
oh, it is been going downhill.
Has it? I mean, I've heard about Atlanta. I don't know nothing
Yeah, I've
about
been to
Georgia.
Atlanta.
I've been to the Atlanta
Uh,
airport.
exactly. That's all I needed to see.
That's all I needed to see.
After that, I just left. Never come back.
I did have a connecting flight, but
But it was pretty bad.
yeah, no, I was there. I saw the airport. Airports are never
$20.
like airports are never like the greatest spot though. Wait, were we in the Georgia airport together?
Yes, we were in the Georgia airport
We
together.
were. We were. I remember that.
Chicago had like a full mall in the airport
Oh, nice.
with like designer brands and shit. Like if you're gonna be stuck in an airport for 8 hours, definitely Chicago. Yep.
All right. Noted.
But don't go through their security, otherwise you'll want to kill yourself.
Well, I mean, you got to go through security.
Well, not if you're connecting.
That's true.
Yeah.
So connect through Chicago, but never go to Chicago, so that
Correct.
you don't have to go through the security.
Yeah, if you want to do like 4 hours of shopping for your connecting flight, then yeah, go to Chicago.
Hell yeah. All right, man. Well, let's see. Did we cover everything that we needed to cover for tech in 2025? Let's see. What are the takeaways if you're a junior developer?
Okay. If you're a
just
junior developer,
just control
don't
delete,
be.
you're done.
Pretend to be a mid-level.
Pretend to be a mid-level. Lie. Go to the Tortuga Society, and they have experience fabrication.
Of which
services.
a lot of it you'll actually have to work for, but it's
Yeah.
worth it.
You have to do, but it'll be like training.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're a junior developer, be a mid-level developer by hook or crook. If you're a mid-level developer, what?
Be a senior developer.
By hook or crook. Just be more senior. If you are a senior developer, what should you do?
You should apply as much as possible.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting one.
And you should
try to find the jobs that nobody's applying for.
Yeah, but some of those jobs are really shitty, but
some of them are, but
you can always quit.
LinkedIn is oversaturated.
Okay.
So if you're a senior developer and you're looking for a job in 2025,
Indeed.
I would even say Google Maps.
Google Maps.
Google Maps to career page, software engineer. If it's not listed anywhere, nobody's applying for it. So those are the jobs to look out for.
Okay.
And if you need one, you will get hired. It won't be the best, but you will get hired.
You'll get hired. And then you should stack and make as much money as possible so that you can retire before AI takes all of our jobs.
Max the 401ks, max the SPY.
Well, so the problem with maxing the 401k is that you can't touch the 401ks until you're 60.
No, still max them, right? The government doesn't need that money.
Well, yeah, but you could put it into an investment vehicle that you could start taking money out of. So like I was maxing. I stopped maxing because I realized like if my goal is to retire early, then it doesn't make sense for me to dump $60,000 a year into a 401k that I'm not going to be able to touch for 30 years. Right.
Yes, it does, because then you can still do a burn down on your.
Well, I understand the tax implications of it, but you're saying that you could just spend, instead of spending interest, you can spend principal.
Yes, you could spend principal on your FIRE if your 401k is high enough. And then for your 401k, you can always leave the country to get additional tax implications on it that are a lot lower than staying in the country.
All right, so there's things to consider. I still
Do the math,
I have a lot of
make an
money.
educated decision.
Yeah.
But the TLDR is stash as much as you humanly can.
Yeah, and don't put it in cash because interest rates are going back down. Money will be printed.
Yep.
Right? Like Trump.
But it
Trump.
all
I love Trump, but he's not going to balance the budget. He's not
it
going to
either needs
fix.
to go against your mortgage or into
Yeah.
a standard investment vehicle.
Yeah.
One of the two, no other option.
Yeah. And if you are not a junior developer, you're not a mid-level developer, you're not a senior developer, you're not a developer, then what you need to do right now is you need to go down to the Costco and you need to apply for greeter and you need to start Costco maxing.
You need to suck the assistant manager's dick to get your $32 an hour at Costco.
Yeah.
Because
I
I'll
don't
tell you
know
what,
I don't know if that's part of the job qualifications.
that blowjob is going to be infinitely worth infinitely more than your 10 minutes of gagging and suffering.
Yeah. But why
5
would you,
if you're good.
why would you have to suck? You're saying that's gonna that you're trying.
That's going to set you apart from everybody else applying at Costco.
You're gonna be a cut above the rest of the people applying. If
you know, and then it's a Costco job. You'll work that forever. Costco's not going away.
Costco's not going anywhere.
Yep.
Neither are you.
And that chicken bake is going to be $4.95 for the next 35 years.
You don't think the Costco prices are going up?
Not on the chicken bake. Not on the hot dogs.